تعد العلاقات بين الكويت وأستراليا نموذجاً للتعاون الدولي المبني على أسس الاحترام المتبادل والمصالح المشتركة. سياسياً يتسم التعاون بالثبات والدعم المتبادل في المحافل الدولية، إذ يدعم البلدان القضايا الإنسانية والتنموية عالمياً. وبينما تسعى أستراليا إلى تعزيز السلام والاستقرار في الشرق الأوسط، تقدر الكويت الجهود الأسترالية في حل النزاعات الإقليمية والدولية. اقتصادياً تتميز العلاقات بتعاون مستدام في التجارة والاستثمار، فتستورد الكويت من أستراليا منتجات زراعية ولحوما عالية الجودة، بينما تنظر الشركات الأسترالية إلى السوق الكويتي كوجهة استثمارية واعدة. ثقافياً تشهد العلاقات تطوراً في مجال التعليم، مع اختيار الكثير من الطلبة الكويتيين الجامعات الأسترالية للدراسة فيها، ما يعكس الثقة في جودة التعليم الأسترالي، إلى جانب تنظيم فعاليات ثقافية في الكويت تسلط الضوء على التراث الأسترالي وتعزز التواصل الثقافي بين الشعبين. تمثل العلاقات الكويتية الأسترالية شراكة تتطلع إلى المستقبل، مع التزام مشترك بتعزيز التعاون بما يخدم مصالح البلدين ويحقق تطلعات شعبيهما.
أهلا بكم. برنامج السفير ينزل في هذه الحلقة ضيفا هنا في مقر إقامة السفيرة الأسترالية لدى الكويت السيدة ميليسا كيلي. على طاولة الحوار معها سوف نفتح ملف التعاون عسكريا وأمنيا واقتصاديا وتجاريا مع الكويت، وإقليميا سوف نتحدث معها عن وجهة نظر أستراليا فيما يحصل في المنطقة، تحديدا في غزة وسوريا، وسنتحدث أيضا عن الداخل الأسترالي. كل هذه المحاور وغيرها سوف نضعها على طاولة النقاش مع ضيفتنا السفيرة الأسترالية لدى الكويت، لكن بعد قليل. أهلا بكم من جديد. نبدأ حوارنا مع ضيفتنا ومضيفتنا في هذه الحلقة من برنامج السفير، سعادة السيدة ميليسا كيلي، السفيرة الأسترالية لدى الكويت. Miss Kelly, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here today.
It's a pleasure for us, Your Excellency. A good starting point would be Australia's vision to enhance its military and defense collaboration with Kuwait. How do you see that thing going on and developing?
Well, Australia is so proud to have deep, warm and long-standing bilateral ties with Kuwait. In fact, last year we celebrated 50 years of bilateral relations. Our ties actually started much before 1974, which was when our two governments agreed to start cooperating, and commenced with ties between our people. Since then it's grown to a lot of trade, a lot of investment, education, food security, so a really multifaceted relationship. But one of the aspects that I'm most proud of is Australia's role in the US-led coalition which liberated Kuwait during the invasion. This part of our shared history reflects our shared vision for a world in which countries can choose their own fate. They're not subject to invasions or incursions on their sovereignty. And it doesn't matter your size, but, you know, we can all live in a world that is peaceful and countries enjoy their sovereignty. So this cemented the bilateral ties, but also it's the centre of our military ties. And, you know, this is a region, in fact, many regions have seen ongoing issues like that. I mean, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we were talking about just before the program. There are many examples over the world where issues of sovereignty are still under threat. So countries like Kuwait and Australia need to continue cooperating, need to be playing a leadership role, and to ensure that the world is a safe and peaceful place.
What can you tell me about Australia's initiatives to expand its trade partnerships with Kuwait so that they can include new sectors like technology and renewable energy?
Trade is a foundational element of our relations. In fact, you know, I mentioned those relations go back much before the diplomatic ties, and you know, it was really started by grain traders, by meat, animal traders who started cooperating on a family level, on a people-to-people level, And we've seen that cooperation last until today. I'm so proud that, for example, every piece of bread that is made by Kuwait flour mills is made of Australian wheat. And so that role in Kuwait's food security is very, very foundational. It's based on those long links, so of course there are ways that we can transform it, we can use technology, we can bring it into the future. So there's a lot of really fascinating collaboration happening with, on the science side with institutions like KISA and KFAS to look at ways we can be more efficient and effective using technology to create food, especially now in times of, you know, global food security challenges.
Yeah, and supply chains and...
Exactly. So that's the food side and the trade side. Talking about energy, investment and the investment relationship, I think, plays a really important role in the global energy transition. Kuwait Investment Authority, among other Kuwaiti investors, are very important partners, and they are playing a huge role in Australia's energy transition. We, like Kuwait, traditionally an energy exporter. We have our prosperity and our economy has traditionally relied on the mining sector, on the mineral sector, and on the export of those commodities. So it's a very big undertaking for Australia to transition. It requires a lot of investment, but it's something we're absolutely committed to doing. And it's very positive to see it moving forward with the support and the investment of Kuwaiti partners. So these are just two examples of areas where the trade relationship is moving from something that is, that has lasted for decades, and through technology, cooperation and dialogue, we're moving that into the future and evolving it to produce outcomes in the benefit of both countries.
Exactly. Another side of cooperation between Australia and Kuwait is education. Are there any initiatives on the side of Australia to expand its cultural exchange programs or even make Australian education more accessible to Kuwaiti students?
One of the great joys of my job is meeting Kuwaitis who have studied in Australia. At the moment, I think we've got moving back towards about 1,000 Kuwaiti students studying across Australian institutions. And so while it's not, the largest international destination for education, the reports and the stories of students of the welcome they received in Australia, the lifestyle they enjoyed, the travel experiences, and the way they felt safe and secure and welcomed in the community, it's something I'm so proud of. Our universities are world class. We've got some great courses in areas that are very, very, very well targeted to Kuwait's vision to transform its own economy. So I think there's huge opportunity to develop this relationship further. So, to answer your question, I want to see more Kuwaiti students studying in Australia. I want to see more partnerships between institutions. It's very positive to see developments in that landscape in Kuwait with new universities opening. We have 2 Australian institutions on the ground in terms of the Australian University and Box Hill College. And they're both working to expand their enrolments and course offerings. So it's a really exciting space. And it's one, like I said at the outset, that is a real highlight for my work here.
Yes. Moving on to regional stability. As you know, Your Excellency, the Gulf region has been witnessing some highs and lows. I would love to know about Australia's support of Kuwait's role as a promoter for regional stability and a mediator. Kuwait is always there whenever a conflict erupts. How do you support that role?
Well, that's absolutely right, and we deeply value Kuwait's role in the region as a humanitarian country, as a friend to all. Kuwait, I think, it's so important to maintain ties, to promote dialogue, and to promote peace and stability in the way Kuwait does. And it's very foundational, I think, to Kuwait's diplomacy, to the Kuwaiti people, to the way to the way Kuwaitis see themselves in the world. And it's something Australians can really relate to as well. Like I said earlier in discussing the invasion, neither Australia nor Kuwait are major superpowers.
Yes.
We rely on the international system, we rely on international law, and we rely on countries talking and doing the right thing for our citizens to live in peace and stability. And so what Kuwait is doing in its region, which is vitally important, Australia is also doing in our region to ensure that countries can choose their own fate, that where differences exist, they are acknowledged, and we can cooperate in a way that serves our interests.
Yes.
So we very much support Kuwait's role, and I think, with the challenges you mentioned in the region, it's vitally important to see that it continues. And I want to take this opportunity to congratulate Kuwait on a hugely successful GCC summit at the end of last year. I think it was a fantastic start to Kuwait's presidency of the GCC, and we're looking forward to working with Kuwait and to seeing Kuwait's role continue to bring peace and stability to the region.
Let's cross the borders to Gaza. What's been going on there with the news of an imminent ceasefire now? How does Australia look at the tragedy that is uncovering day after day after day, day in, day out in Gaza? How do you see that developing again?
Well, I think there's simply no other way to see it as a tragedy. The loss of life in Gaza since October 23 is appalling. Especially amongst children, and like people all over the world, we have watched, but we have been very active diplomatically in calling for an immediate ceasefire, in calling for access for humanitarian aid, for protection of humanitarian workers, and an end to the conflict. We want a region where Palestinian people can live in peace with a country of their own, with sovereign borders, and we think that this is the best outcome for a conflict which has gone on for way too long. So it's been...
And you think it is possible to have the two-state solution? Do you think that is an option now?
Well, we think it's the only way out of the conflict. So I'm not sure what other options there are. A lot of work is required, and we very much welcome the news that you mentioned that a ceasefire agreement may be imminent. That's the first step.
Yeah.
We hope that will eventuate soon, because people have suffered for too long.
Yes, they did. In Syria, the Assad regime has collapsed. A new dawn is uncovering in Syria. What is Australia's role, even like politically speaking or structurally speaking? What role is Australia playing in the post-Assad future in Syria?
Well, I think in December we all watched the scenes unfold in Syria with, and it was wonderful to see that very joyful moment that Syrians were able to enjoy after decades of oppression, of appalling violence and oppression, and no one mourns the end of the Assad regime. It is. As you say, we hope that this heralds a new chapter for the Syrian people, who also have suffered too much. This is a conflict that has affected the whole region. People have been displaced, not just to countries bordering Syria, but broadly in the region. And so this is a major shift now that we see this change in Syria. We want to see an end to violence. We want to see dialogue. And we want to see a new chapter for the Syrian people. Australia has been a humanitarian donor to Syria. I think we've donated about $500 million Australian dollars since 2011, and we also, acknowledge Kuwait's very generous role as a humanitarian donor, as a supporter of the Syrian people, and the Syrian people have shown incredible resilience over these very, very difficult decades. And like so many in the region, have suffered enough. So we really hope to see a new chapter, and we hope to see peace and stability in their country.
Now, this morning there were reports that an Australian prisoner of war was killed in Russia, and Australia summoned the Russian ambassador, and another report mentioned that this could be a crisis brewing between Moscow and Australia. Can you shed some more light on this issue?
Well, I don't want to get into the detail because this is obviously an ongoing consular issue. It's an issue that my foreign minister and my government is very deeply involved in. And you mentioned some of those developments that have unfolded in Australia. But we very strongly oppose Russia's illegal and immoral invasion of Ukraine. We have been working to support Ukraine over a number of years now, and we want to see an end of that conflict. But it's a very difficult situation. It's a very a sad situation for the family of this Australian. That's the focus of Australia and the Australian government at this time.
Of course, it's the humanitarian part as always. Back to the relations between Australia and Kuwait. Are there any joint discussions when it comes to security dialogues between Australia and Kuwait? With rising tensions all around the world, are you discussing how you could collaborate to put an end to regional or world threats?
Well, we have a very close relationship with the Kuwait government. We enjoy very excellent cooperation at all levels. I was very pleased last year that we were able to hold, I should say, Kuwait hosted senior officials talks here in Kuwait. And so we had a delegation of Australian officials visit Kuwait, and very, very good meetings were held with the Foreign Ministry and involving other agencies as well. So this is the centrepiece of our bilateral government-to-government cooperation. There are security elements of that, there are trade elements.
There are dialogues going on between you?
Yes, of course, of course. Dialogue is a fundamental part of I think, any diplomatic relation. And in a warm relationship like the one that Australia and Kuwait share, of course, it's very natural that we cooperate and we talk on all issues that are important to both countries.
And Australia has very recently implemented restrictions, or I might say a ban, on social media access to those under 16. Here rises a question about digital freedom as opposed to online safety. How does Australia strike that balance?
It's been very interesting. I think to see this law in Australia gain a lot of traction internationally, and I've had a lot of interest in Kuwait on what we're doing. This was a long process that led to the government passing this law, but it was one that was very much motivated by concerns for the health and safety of our children, and the approach was based on evidence, on data that showed a clear link between social media usage of children and mental health outcomes, on anxiety, on suicide, things like this, that we want to do everything we can to prevent our children from suffering. So there was an extensive process of consultation involving tech companies, schools, parents, government agencies, community organisations, and the decision was made to ban access to social media for under 16s. Now, this, I think implementation is going to be the next step, and we know this is something that is quite groundbreaking.
Yeah,
so the legislation has a lot of flexibility built into it to allow us to respond to technology changes. I mean, I have young children myself, and I know the benefits that they receive from the use of technology. My eldest son loves FaceTiming his cousins in Australia every week, and they play a lot of educational games with each other, and it's something that they get so much joy from and they learn from. So it's very important that this is balanced, and the legislation does take this into account. But I'm looking forward to sharing Australia's experience with agencies in Kuwait, and I think this is something that we can take forward together, that we can talk about, that we can measure the results of, because I know Kuwait, like Australia, is a society that above all else values the health and safety of our children.
Exactly, but you don't see that contradicting online freedom, because there are voices that say it has to do with a kind of freedom of speech. It's digital freedom. I need to do what I need to do, and this is my freedom. Why do you take that away from me?
Well, I think all of those things are included in the legislation. So, like I said, it's not going to impinge on access to educational apps, games, all sorts of things that children will legitimately use. But it places the onus on tech companies to make sure that these social media apps, which have been proven to produce very negative outcomes on children's mental health, that they are not able to access them. So we think that balance is adequately accounted for in the legislation. But like I said, it's world leading.
It is.
It's new.
It is.
So it's something that we are going to keep under review as we implement it. But we're looking forward to seeing some very positive results, and we're very committed overall to the safety of our children.
Moving on to personal things, like this is your first ambassadorial role, as I understand.
That's right.
How do you see life as an ambassador? Diplomatically speaking, it's a hectic job, but it moves on to be affecting your personal life. How do you strike that balance between the two sides?
Oh, look, it's an enormous honour and a privilege for me to represent my country in Kuwait. I've served as a diplomat in a number of countries in the region, in Jordan, in Saudi Arabia. And when I was posted to Saudi Arabia, I also covered Oman and Bahrain. So I know the region a little bit, but as you said, this is my first time to lead one of our missions. And I'm also the first woman that has been posted as Australia's ambassador to Kuwait. So there's a number of firsts there. But yes, it's been an immense privilege. It's a wonderful place to be a diplomat. Kuwait, it's such a community, it's a country that is a community in many ways. And the welcome I have received it was so warm, but it's continued over the 2.5 years that I've been here. And my family and I are very happy. Work-life balance, as you suggest, can be challenging as an ambassador, and my children are still quite young. My daughter was actually born in Kuwait. Several months into my posting. So the challenges of, and I want to be a very present mother in their life. But at the end of the day, I'm very proud of the role model that I am providing for them, and I hope that they look back on this experience as something that they're really proud of, that their mother did this job. I think the partnership that I have with my husband as well, and I think the role model that our relationship serves for them is something that I'm also really proud of. The fact that he is so present and is such a supportive and caring dad to his kids. So it's not always perfect and not always easy. But it's it's wonderful to. I wouldn't change it. Let's put it that way.
How is your interaction? I mean, do you visit diwaniyas? Do you get invitations? How is life in this context?
I do. I visit. I love. The Diwania life in Kuwait, and it's something that I had never experienced despite being posted to many countries in the region. And that's one of the great joys of being a diplomat, getting to discover the culture, being brought into people's homes and communities. And from the moment I arrived, the openness and the curiosity and the welcome of the Kuwaiti people was apparent to me, and it's something that is very distinct, despite links, family links, cultural links to other countries in the region. Kuwait has developed such a unique culture, and I think it's that seafaring history. It's the history of Kuwaitis going out into the world and bringing the world back to Kuwait in their food, in their language. And so when a female ambassador walks into a diwania, it's, I'm welcomed with open arms. I have a chance to practice my Arabic.
Great.
My Kuwaiti could be better than it is, I think, but shway shway.
I'd love to have like a couple of sentences, whether in Kuwaiti or in Arabic. I know you studied Arabic in Jordan, but it might not be that good. But how would you welcome us in Arabic?
أهلا وسهلا في السفارة الأسترالية. أنا سعيدة جدا بوجودي في الكويت، وكنت في الكويت لسنتين ونص مع الأسرة،
That's impressive.
I know. I'm a bit nervous, actually. And I think we were talking about this before. As an Australian who, has the benefit of such, so many people around the world speaking such strong English, I do feel quite shy, and I need to work on my confidence, I think. But people are so kind, and slowly, my Kuwaiti words are increasing as well. So,
they should.
Yes. Thank you to the community for all this, for everyone's support in that regard.
You're more than welcome on behalf of them. You mentioned that you worked in Saudi Arabia, in Bahrain, in Jordan, and now in Kuwait. This Arabian effect, how did it add up to you, culturally speaking?
Well, we've talked about the language, and I studied Fusha, obviously, and it's such a beautiful language. It's a complex language. It's almost mathematical in its organisation. And I think for the rest of my life, I will be a student of the Arabic language. But culturally, I think one thing that Australia and the region shares that I think is really beautiful is just the centrality of the family.
Yes.
How important the family unit is. And as someone with young children that, as I mentioned, is often juggling those commitments, the way children are welcomed into social occasions, into society, I think is really, really beautiful in the region. But no, it's a region with a fascinating history, with incredible people, and with very, very strong links between the people in the region and those in Australia. I talked about the trade links, but even before that, nearly 100 years ago, an Australian photographer, Alain Villiers, came to Kuwait to take photographs of the maritime life in the communities. And these were links that, between ordinary Kuwaitis and ordinary Australians that have, set the tone for our relationship and sort of survived till today. So we have Australia is a country of migrants, and we have very, very strong communities with links back to the region, and it's something we're so proud of. So, I think I'm just to go back to what I said at the beginning. I'm so proud to serve my country here. I'm very proud to be the Australian ambassador, and like many of my colleagues, I also chose Kuwait as my first ambassadorial posting, and it's been a wonderful experience.
That's great.
So
that's great.
I'm very, very happy and very privileged to be here.
You're Australian, and I know every Australian is a tennis fan. The Australian Open is underway, and Alex de Minaur just made it to the second round, or the third round. Do you have a favorite Australian player?
Oh, it's I think it's. I'm not going to single out a single player, but I know there's tennis.
I don't want to embarrass you. Just don't mention anyone if you want.
There's tennis fever in Australia at the moment, and the community is behind so many players. We were talking about there's a young Lebanese player, Hadi, who is getting so much support amongst the community in Australia at the moment. But look. It's a really exciting time of year, and I encourage Kuwaitis who have not experienced the excitement of the Australian Open to look at coming out for that in the future, because it's a fantastic event.
I'm sure it is. Thank you so much, Madam Ambassador, for being here, for sitting with us, and for sharing all those views with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. The pleasure was mine.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. هذا كان حوارنا مع ضيفتنا ومضيفتنا سعادة السيدة ميليسا كيلي، السفيرة الأسترالية لدى الكويت. حتى نلتقي مع سفير آخر، تقبلوا تحياتي وإلى اللقاء.